Hello everyone, my name is Olivia and let's talk about my favorite reads of 2019. So I was creating this list last night and I was looking at all the books that I was adding onto my list and I realized that none of them are YA. I think it's because while I do still read YA and I still really enjoy YA, it doesn't resonate with me as much anymore and I don't feel as connected to the characters anymore because I'm older than them. So this year I have been delving into adult fiction and I've been really enjoying it. Those stories have been really hitting me hard. There are a bunch of different types of stories in this list, and I am just very excited to talk about all my favorite reads of 2019. So this is going to be in chronological order. The favorites go by when I first read them throughout the year to like the last favorite that I read in 2019. I hope that makes sense. Let's just get right into it. I know you're just eager to learn about my favorite books of 2019. So one of my first favorite books of 2019 that I read was When We Left Cuba by Chanel Clayton. This is the companion novel to Next Year in Havana, which was my absolute favorite book of 2018, and this was a new favorite of 2019. This follows Beatriz Perez as she lives in America now that she has moved away from Cuba after the Cuban Revolution, and she is very much set on going back home. She wants to take revenge on Castro and get back the island that she misses and loves, and she wants to go back to that lifestyle that she lived for so many years. So one day she gets recruited by the CIA to become a spy and potentially assassinate Fidel. Not only does this talk about Cuban diaspora, it also speaks about the anger and the frustration that you have when you are living in a new country and you desperately just want to go home. I really connected with Beatrice because she was not only just missing her homeland, but she also was a very independent woman and she was just a very outspoken lady, and the way that she just carried herself was so inspirational and something that I also just really connect to. And Chanel Clayton has quickly become one of my favorite authors because she writes about these Cuban characters in a way that feels like she's looking into my mind. And When We Left Cuba just swept me off my feet. It is full of espionage, it's full of romance, it's full of forbidden romance, it's full of these confusing feelings when you're living in a new nation but you want to go back home but you can't. It is just so well done. I highly recommend it if you want to look for any Latinx books to read. Another favorite book of 2019 for me was Circe by Madeline Miller. This is a retelling of Circe or Circe's life. She is the daughter of Helios, who is the sun god in Greek mythology, and she gets banished to an island for eternity because not only does she practice witchcraft, but she's also very much interested in mortals and she is interested in helping them. So once she gets banished to this island, she's living alone, she's practicing her witchcraft, and slowly but surely people come to her island. Some are good and some are bad, and the bad ones she takes out her revenge on, and the good ones she helps along the way. It is such an interesting retelling because I never knew anything about Circe, but just reading about her life and just like the vivid descriptions that come along with a Madeline Miller book was so fun to read about. I really enjoy how this book is heavy with description. There's not a lot of dialogue. It's mostly just about Circe living alone and learning more about herself and the people around her. And it was just so well done. Madeline Miller writes the most incredible stories, and I hope that she does more Greek mythological retellings in the future. I know she said she doesn't want to, but I'm hoping she might change her mind. But this was such an enjoyable read, and I really enjoyed it. Not as much as The Song of Achilles, which is one of my favorite books of all time, but this one was also just really enjoyable. It was so well written, and Circe was such an interesting, morally gray character that we got to explore throughout her entire life. The next book I read on audiobook and loved it so much that I had to get a physical copy, and it is Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. This follows a family after their daughter Lydia has died, and it explores each different family member as they go through the grieving process, and their own secrets and Lydia's secrets slowly unfurl and they learn more about each other. It's a very sad book, and it also just shows how families, while they grieve together, they grieve separately and they also have just different ways of grieving. And I really enjoyed this book because I'm very much interested in seeing a familial unit and seeing how they all have different types of secrets and just hidden pasts that they don't talk about. And I also just found the writing to be beautiful. When I listened to this on audiobook, I just could not stop listening to it because it just felt like I was listening to a like family drama like TV show in my mind. It was so well done, and the secrets that unfurl and the relationships that this family has and the struggles that they go through is something that you could see happening to yourself. So it's very eye-opening. It's a very dark contemporary, but I also just really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed just seeing how Celeste Ng explored grief. It was so well done. The next book is most definitely gonna be on everyone's favorite list, and it is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I actually read this book twice this year. I read it first physically and then I read it on audiobook. I much prefer the physical version of the story because the audiobook is a little bit confusing because it is a full cast. But if you do not know what Daisy Jones and the Six is, despite us constantly talking about it on booktube throughout 2019. It is about a woman named Daisy Jones. She is an up-and-coming singer, and her manager decides to put her with the Six, which is another famous band, and they collaborate. And Daisy Jones and the head of the Six, Billy Dunn, do not get along together, but they also write incredible songs together. So it's dealing with that tension where they are attracted to one another, but they can't be together because it's like forbidden, and they also just don't want to let their feelings be shown. It also explores how the band rose to fame, and it also shows how they eventually fell apart. It is told kind of like a play format, so rather than getting a description, we just get straight up dialogue, so it feels like you're reading a play. And while a lot of people didn't enjoy the structure of Daisy Jones, I thought it was really interesting to write a book in a way that feels like you're seeing a documentary in book form, because this is told kind of like a documentary. It explores the rise of the Six, it explores the rise of Daisy Jones, it explores how they join together, and it explores how their band eventually falls apart. And it's told in such a unique way that I wish more people would utilize, and I am just so excited for the show that is eventually going to come out, because you get to see all the lyrics for all the songs that they wrote, but you don't get to hear it, and I'm just so excited to eventually hear these songs because they're so beautiful and heartbreaking and just full of angst. I very much enjoyed Daisy Jones and the Six. Not as much as The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, but this is definitely a favorite book. The next book is a book that I am sure is also going to be on everyone's favorite list, and it is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This is a story about the first son of the United States and his budding romance with the Prince of England. This is a romance that I thoroughly enjoyed because it made me laugh out loud. There are very few romances that not only explore so many different aspects of life, like exploring your sexuality, standing up to your parents, political issues, and just finding yourself in your 20s. But while that happens, there are also hilarious moments in Red, White, and Royal Blue. So like, while it's a serious book with a serious romance, it doesn't take itself too seriously. So we have these hilarious moments between Alex and Henry, who at first don't enjoy each other's presence, but eventually form a friendship and then a romance, and it is just so well done. At first, it was hard to get into for me because it's told in third person, and I feel like it was a little awkward at first, but once you dive into the book, you just go on this ride with Alex and Henry and their parents and their siblings, and you fall in love with each character because they're also unique and quirky, but they also have some serious issues that they are working through, and it is not only hilarious and heartwarming, but it's also something that's relatable and eye-opening, and it is just such a well-rounded romance. It's not just a romance, it explores so many different aspects of someone's life. The next book actually took me by surprise. I read it on audiobook because I've seen so many reviews saying that this book is somewhat dense. It's full of this fluffy description that people couldn't get into. But listening to it on audiobook, I fell in love with the story, and it is The Dreamers by Karen Thompson Walker. This is about a very sleepy, very quiet town in California that gets overrun by this sleep sickness. So at first it starts with a campus, and this one girl is very tired and she goes to sleep. And she sleeps and she sleeps and she sleeps and she doesn't get woken up. And nothing seems to even stir her. And eventually she dies because she just falls into the sleep sickness, like a coma state that she can't wake up from, and it eventually ends her life. And slowly but surely, a lot of people in this town get overcome by the sleep sickness. It's like a very quiet epidemic that runs through this town that gets quarantined from the rest of the country. And what's interesting about this novel is that it not only follows one person in the town, but it follows many other people in the town. So we get these two daughters who have a father who's very paranoid about the sleep sickness. He always feels like the world is ending, and he's always preparing for the eventual apocalypse. So we deal with that family. Then we deal with a newlywed couple who just had a baby as they are trying to protect that baby from the sleep sickness. Then we have a girl whose roommate was the first person to be overcome by the sleep sickness. We follow so many different points of views that are so vastly different from each other. So it explores their feelings and their fears and what they're trying to protect most during this very horrendous time and this very scary time. And it also explores the fact that this town is under militarized quarantine and they aren't allowed to like even breathe without someone noticing them. So it's not an apocalyptic book, but it's very much like an epidemic-y book. There's something that's overriding this piece of society, and everyone is scared and everyone is frantic and everyone is doing something unique in order to survive. And I thought it was very interesting. I thought the writing style was amazing. It felt like a fictionalized radio drama in my head when I was listening to the audiobook. I know a lot of people said it was boring because there were so many descriptions. It was just very much like introspective, but I really enjoy that. I really like books that are filled with vivid descriptions and just a lot of introspection, and I like how it explores so many different families and lives during this very weird time, and I just really enjoyed it. I highly recommend the audiobook if you can't see yourself getting into the book physically, but I'm so glad I have a physical copy because the premise really interested me, and I feel like the story itself just really took me by surprise because I let the negative hype get to me, and I thought that I wouldn't enjoy this book, but it turned out to be a favorite of mine. I really enjoyed it. The next book is a book that I have spoken about quite literally everywhere, and it is The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. I think this is my favorite book of the year. I don't pick like top favorites. I don't pick a number one, but I think this might be number one. The Memory Police is about a woman who lives on an unnamed island, and in this very small society, memories are being manipulated by the memory police. So one day they may wake up and they may feel like something is missing, but they won't notice until they look at an object and think, I have no memories and no particular attachment to this, so clearly must be erased from my memory. So it could be hats. Hats are erased from every single person's memory. Then it could be ribbons, and then it could be roses. And the main character is an author, and she learns that her editor is one of the rare few whose memories aren't being manipulated. So while everyone else is losing the memories of ribbons and roses, and they are destroying these items because they don't have any attachment to them, this editor is still remembering these items that are disappearing from everyone else's minds. And that is very dangerous because the memory police is very much enforcing these memory losses onto everyone in the island. So it's a very interesting book. It's so hard to describe. It's a book that I just saw in Barnes & Noble's one day, was very interested by the cover itself, and then picked up from my library and absolutely loved it. I think the premise is so weird and interesting and really made me interested in exploring more Japanese fiction because the way that they write is so dreamlike and so much more focused on description and just like setting the tone and being very atmospheric while also being very introspective, and I feel like that's very interesting. I feel like Japanese fiction is something that I definitely want to delve into more in 2020, and this was just a tiny little treat of that, and I think that The Memory Police this just like swept me off my feet. It was definitely a surprise. It wasn't something that I was eagerly anticipating. It was just a book I picked up randomly and like blew my mind. It's so hard to describe, but I feel like you should just dive in without knowing a lot. Just know that memories are being manipulated, things are disappearing, and a woman has to help save her editor. That's all you need to know. Another book that I've been speaking about a lot in many recent videos is Security. Security is about a bunch of employees working in the Mandalay, which is opening up very soon, and they are spending the night setting up the hotel, making sure everything is prim and proper before the opening. And while they are setting up everything in the hotel, we get to see from an omnipresent point of view a killer slowly kill off these employees one by one. So it's very much of a slasher book. It feels like Scream in book form. It is such an interesting novel. You get to see it from an omnipresent point of view. So not only do you get to see the employees setting up the hotel, but you also get to see the killer slowly but surely sneaking up on these employees. It's a very interestingly written novel because it flows like a movie, because the scenes seamlessly flip-flop between these characters. So you get to see employees, then you get to see the killer, then you get to see another employee, then you get to see the killer again. I'm like trying to convince everyone to read Security. It is a very short novel, less than 300 pages. It's very much like Scream, but also like a hint of The Shining, because all these people are stuck in a hotel and they cannot escape. Never expected to pick this one up, but I did want to read a story about a bunch of people just stuck in one setting, because I feel like it's a really cool way to ramp up the tension and explore these characters' secrets that slowly get revealed because they are in such close quarters. There's nothing to do but to talk. And Security was such a weird novel that leaves you a little bit dissatisfied, but I liked it. I just really enjoyed it. I thought it was such a good time. Number 9, but also like remember there's no particular order, I just read this one later in the year, is The Starless Sea. This took me a whole month to read, and I'm not mad about it because I wanted to savor this story. I just really wanted to just take my time with this story, which I highly implore every single person do. And it explores so many different characters. It's like a fairy tale come to life. But to give you the bare bones of the story, which is very difficult to explain in the first place, it is about a college student named Zachary who takes out a book from the library, and it has no author, it has no publication date, it has no publisher, and it is just a very odd book in the library. And he loves reading, so he's like, this book seems very mysterious, let me take it out, let me read it. So he starts reading it in his dorm, and he's reading about these fantastical tales, and then he realizes that one particular story in the book is about his life. It is about a moment in his life that quite literally nobody else would know about because he was completely alone when it happened, and it would be impossible for someone else to know about this brief glimpse into his life. So that starts his quest to learn more about this book and the society and all these people who collect books. And it is a very atmospheric, very whimsical book that you just will lose yourself in, and it is so full of fantastical elements and different stories that weave together to form one cohesive story. But I just thoroughly enjoyed it. This cover is also just gorgeous and is another reason why I really enjoy this book. And a book that I read in December actually became a favorite of mine, and it is Night by Elie Wiesel. And this is a non-fiction memoir about Ellie's life during the Holocaust. He was sent to so many different camps, but one main camp that he survived in was Auschwitz. And it's just such a heartbreaking, I like got goosebumps just like talking about it. But it is such a heartbreaking and important, oh my god, I'm like getting emotional. Wow. Who would have thought we would do this on BookTube? It is such a heartbreaking and emotional and such an important read that I wish every single person in the world would pick up at least once in their lifetime. The messages and the strife that just Ellie went through, just reading about it, just reading from his point of view, is heartbreaking and just like devastating. It's also a very short nonfiction that I read in one sitting because once you get into it, you just like have to keep reading more. Like Anne Frank's Diary, it is a book that I would recommend to every single person. I feel like you can take away something from that book and just like reminding yourself of that piece of history and keeping that piece of history alive. I'm gonna read a quote from Night, the book itself. It says, To forget would not only be dangerous, but offensive. To forget the dead would be akin to killing them a second time. It's a book that you just need to read to remind yourself of that time in history and to remind ourselves that we can never let that happen again. So yeah, Night was just a book that really gripped my heart, and I'm really glad that I picked it up this year. So those are my top 10 favorite books of 2019. I'm actually a little sad because I read 100 books this year, and only 10 of them have really gripped me. So next year I do want to focus more on just reading for quality rather than quantity, but these are some of my favorite books of 2019. So let me know what your favorite books of 2019 were. Let me know if we have some of the same favorites. And thank you so much for another wonderful year on BookTube. I'm so grateful for you all. I'm so grateful for the community that we have created, and thank you so much for being so supportive and so lovely. Bye!